So the whole purpose of today's lecture is HTTP and forms. So HTTP or HTTPS is how we communicate across the internet. So if you think of a normal URL structure, this one here that's on the screen, and even if I enhance, it won't enhance that, but it'll have HTTPS // and then it'll have a website, and then it'll have a path. And all URLs, no matter what the page, are going to follow the same structure. And this is what that structure is. That first part, the HTTP, that's called a protocol. So that's like, it's either HTTP or HTTPS. There are other protocols like FT something and file. But for the most part, when you're talking to somebody over the internet, you're going to be using HTTP or HTTPS. What's the difference between the two? Yeah, security. So a lot of browsers now will kind of reject, or if you ever get your browser to say, hey, this site is not secure, are you sure you want to proceed? That's because it's HTTP site instead of HTTPS. So it's just a new standard they released that most websites adhere to now. So that's how everything starts off. And then you get to www.gendesign.com. And this is like the server. This is the actual, the location of the server you want to connect to. So in real life, this corresponds to an IP address. So if you ever seen those long string of digits, it's like, how many digits is an IP address?
3, 3, 3, and 3 on IPv4.
Yeah.
IPv6 is 2 additional sets of that.
So there we go. So if you ever see something like that 172, that's an IP address. And that is like the actual location over the internet where all these resources are going to live. And this text right here, that is kind of like an alias or like a nickname for that location. So either one of those will work in your URL address bar. But so you go to gendesign.com, that's like I'm going to navigate across the wires of the internet to a server. It's kind of analogous. I think the homework used like a library. That's almost like navigating to a specific stack in the library. Or a postal office, I think was another example. That's like navigating to a house. It's like it's your way of finding your way around the internet. And then after the .com or .edu or .whatever all the new extensions are, you have a path. And that is the path to the resource you're looking for. So this resource is 2007 samples first.html. And that means, okay, I'm going to over HTTP, I'm going to connect to gendesign.com. And I'm going to request the resource /2007 samples /first.html. And so when you send that request, it's traveling to this server and it's asking that server for this resource. And then that server is going to come back and say, here is the resource. It's going to return that resource back to you. And so this is mostly what it looks like. The internet can be kind of roughly categorized in clients, which is what I'm typing on right now, a computer, and servers. And servers are big banks of machines that run in people's basements, or they run in server farms. And what happens is if you're the client, you send a request saying, hey, can I have this resource? And that request goes to the server. And then the server says, are you authorized to access this resource? Is it okay for me to give you this resource? Does this resource exist? And it checks all that stuff, and then it says, it does, and then it sends back that response message. So you send a request to the server with HTTP, and they're going to remember who you are, and they're going to send a request back. They don't have to send a request back. It can time out. If you ever had a website time out or things fail to load because of timeout, it's because the server got your request and either took too long or just ignored it. But you're going to send them a HTTP request, they're going to process it, they're going to send it back. All these websites, so gendesign.com, that's sitting, that resource, that server is sitting on a bank of computers somewhere, which is why all of you from all your different clients, you're on a phone, you're on a mobile computer, mobile computer is a phone. You're on a phone, you're on a laptop, you're on a tablet. Those are all different clients. or you have 100 different clients, they can all talk through the internet, and it always knows to go to the same server. And that's why it's always going to return the same resource no matter which device you're on. So when we talk about HTTP, we talk mostly about like, what does that request look like? Like, what does it look like to actually talk to this other bank of computers somewhere, this server? And most requests, so this is a request type. This is talking about you trying to talk to a server. Most requests are broken up into 4 categories. And broadly, what I'm about to talk about is usually called like REST, R-E-S-T. So the 4 categories are get, post, put, and delete. And I think your chapter talked about get and post. So what it means is whenever you send a get request, you're saying, here, can you retrieve me a resource? So servers usually understand get requests to say, hey, you want to get a piece of information. If you send a post request to a server, you're usually telling it, hey, can you create a piece of information for me, right? So say you enter your information and you want to create a new profile. That would be you giving your information and sending a post request and saying, hey, can you create me a new profile? And then the server would say, yeah, you succeeded or you failed. A put is usually used when something already exists on the server and you want to update it. And then a delete is used to delete your information from a server. And these examples here, that's kind of like the normal structure that you would use to send a request. So if you send a request to just /student, right? So this is like the server name gendesign.com/student. That's going to give you back all the students. And if you say get student /8, that's going to say, okay, you're just looking for student number 8. If you say, hey, I want to post to a student, that's going to be you creating a student. If you delete or update /8, it's going to say, I want to delete or update this specific student. So you're not going to run into that a ton right now, but when you start looking at designing your own servers, that's going to be really important. I want to throw a few other terms out, which you may have heard like around the lingo. So when you talk about like front-end development or people making, front-end development, that's talking about things that live on the client. So front-end development is stuff that is like on your phone or on your computer or in your web browser in some way. When people talk about like back-end development, they usually talk about code that lives on HTTP server. JavaScript, which you all learned, can only be written for which one? Trick question, it can be written for both. Yeah. So JavaScript is really powerful because the same person that knows JavaScript can write a server and can also write a front-end application. In fact, your entire first, 8 weeks of this course was writing just JavaScript, no HTML or CSS, and all that stuff would be on a server. I'm going to throw out a few more terms. API development. Usually when people talk about API development, they're talking about here. People talk about microservices, they're talking about here. Angular, HTML, CSS, all that's going to fall over here. And stuff like Java or Node or Python or any more else language really is going to fall here. The book went into a few examples on what a few requests and what a few responses look like. And so we're just going to gloss over these a little bit before we work into our activity, because our activity we're actually going to build a form to send these requests. So this is a request, and you can see a few of the things that we're already talking about. You can see the line where it says get, right? So this is saying get. This means I want to retrieve a piece of information. And I want to retrieve a piece of information from www, or no, that's who's requesting it. I want to retrieve /blog. I'm going to use HTTP protocol. And you have all this stuff. And a lot of this, not to overwhelm you, is like, okay, where did you come from? right? The user agent. What type of computer or browser did you come from? You can read in and find this person came from a Mozilla browser. What type of information can I accept back? Can I accept JSON or text information? And then the response would look something like this, where it says in the very first line the status. Did it succeed or did it blow up? So this one says 200. A 200 means it succeeded. The 200 is what you want to see if you, like your normal web development, you want to see 200s coming back. And then it'll show, what is the content type? What am I sending you back? How long is the thing that I'm sending you back? And then the last thing that it's saying is, here is the resource, right? If you requested a resource in that response, if it gave you a 200, it's going to send you that resource. In this example, the resource was a page. So they sent you back a web page. So let's do it. Before we move on to building one of these ourselves, does anybody have any questions? Okay. Go ahead and clone this repo down. So for me, cloning that down means going to my LC101 folder. And git cloning LC101 HTTP forms. So I'm going to cd into that directory, and I'm going to use VS Code to open that directory. And then I'll pause here for a second to talk about what we're actually building in the next 20 minutes. All right, not to shamelessly bribe you, but I did bring a bunch of candy from work for whoever can complete these 6 steps. So what we're going to be doing is just building out a form. So I'm going to open my index.html, and here is the form that we're going to be building out, is this beautiful form on the page here. And what we're going to do is we're going to add fields to the form, and then use this form to send a request to a server that lives on the internet, and then try to get a response back from that server. And so we can work through these steps, 1 through 6. We can work through these steps together. And in doing so, we're going to talk about forms, which was the other half of the homework for today. So forms are done by having a form tag on the outside. And it's best practice when you create a form, always give it an ID. And then inside the form, you're going to have inputs. And then those inputs are generally grouped into field sets. And so the inputs are going to be what you want people to enter into your form and what information you want to get from the user. In this case, we're going to get a form that asks for a few things. The first name, the last name, a person's favorite food, and a person's favorite animal. So number 1 is already done. Create a form outline structure. We have a form with an opening and closing tag. Right before we go on to the next one, I want to show you a quick VS Code tip. If sometimes you get frustrated because you forget to save your work or you refresh your page without saving your work, if you want, you can go to Code, Preferences, Settings, and you can say I want to auto-save whenever I leave the page. That was Code, Preferences, Settings. Okay, So number 2 is add a field for last name. So I'm going to add this field within the same field set. So within a field set, you can have any type of fields that are like naturally grouped together. You can have anywhere between 1 and, let's say 1 and 10 fields. So every time I make an input, I'm going to make a label for that input. And this label I'm going to say is for last name. And then I want it to display to the screen is last name. And then for that same label, I'm going to make an input. So in lines 20 through 23, I said, hey, make me a new input and then attach a label to that input. And so if I go back to refresh my screen, I already have this label and this input, but now I added a new one. Now I have first name and last name. Let me do something for the people in the back. You don't have to do this on yours. I'm just going to do it for mine. Oh, well. I guess I'm not going to do that. You said I had a typo? Ooh. That's important. Thank you. So now I have first name and last name. So I can type in my first name and my last name. I don't have a button. I don't have anything else, but I have this basic start so far. The next thing on is to say add a button to submit the form. So forms are submitted normally in 2 ways. Mostly like if you have an iPad or a phone, usually you have to push a button to submit a form. But a lot of times if you're on your computer, you can either push a button or you can hit like the enter key. Both are going to trigger the submission of the form. In this case, we want to add a button. So at the bottom of our form, we're going to say button. And we're going to give it a text that says submit here. Now if I go back and refresh my page, I have my form and my button. So I have one field set with 2 inputs, and then I have a button. Now that I've done a decent bit of work, I'm going to add and commit. A really good question I got last time from someone was like, how often do you add and commit? Like, should I be doing it every 10 minutes or every 10 hours or every 10 days? I think like it's tough to gauge. You want to do it at like a normal stopping point or when you like start adding new functionality. But for me, if I've done 2 big things, I've added an input and added a button, this is a good time for me to stop and add and commit. And if you're worried about like a hardened, if you want a rule because you're having a tough time figuring it out, I would say, yeah, maybe every 20 minutes you need to stop and add and commit. And if you've gone over like 30 or 45 or an hour without adding and committing, that would be an issue. So the more times you stop, the better. So I'll come in here and I'll say, first I'll say, what did I change about application.css? I don't need that change. There we go. What rule did I break? Yeah, I started working on master, and I added in. How many of you all also broke that rule? Yeah, that's probably because you had a bad teacher modeling bad habits. But it's good habit to always start from a fresh branch. So instead of starting from master, I should have started from a fresh branch. And so I would encourage all of you now to switch over to a new branch. Yeah.
In situations like git commit, you can do a -m to add the message. Is there a single line way of cloning and
I mean, so the question was, is there a single line way to clone a repository?
And create, to clone the repository, which we did down to our local.
Yeah, and that's one line, right? Because that's just git clone repository.
Yes, but that does not create your own repository on GitHub.
Oh, so no.
Because right now you're
Yeah.
connected to your own repository, so you don't have.
Yeah, so there's not a single line to be the shortest answer to that.
Mark the repository to your own GitHub account.
Yeah, you can definitely do that. The question was, can you fork? So anything that's on GitHub, you can fork to your own space, and then it's entirely under your control. And you can set it if you want to like fork it and keep tracking other stuff, or you can set it to fork it and I just want to work on my own. Yeah, question over here first.
I was just gonna push it, or like commit push it over, but your thinking is.
Yeah, because this is my repo, it's saying I have to add you as a collaborator. But
Oh, yeah, that happened.
I can definitely add people as collaborators.
What happens if you like make all the files on your thing and then realize you haven't saved it to a repository? How do you backtrack?
When you say saved it to a so the question was, what happens when you made a bunch of files on your thing and haven't saved it to a repository? So what do you mean by saved it to your thing and then?
Well,
Like,
like
save it as a get, like get a niche.
So you've created the files.
yeah, all the files are on my computer, but how do I get them to a Git repository?
Do they live in a same folder on your computer? So if you have a single folder that you want to be a Git repository, you can create a new one using git init. And that'll say everything in this folder, I want to make it into a Git repository. And then if you want to push that branch to GitHub, right, so you have that locally, and then if you want to make that a project on GitHub also, there's like a setting on GitHub that says make, let me find it for you. You can go to your own profile, repositories, and there should be a new repository flag here. And that'll let you, there's an option after you fill it all out, and it'll say, are you pushing an existing repository? And it'll let you push the one you created locally up there. Yeah. All right. Number 4. So, where is this form going to submit to? If I do Will Farrell and I submit, where did it go to? Well, it actually did, because if my stuff disappeared, first of all, right? I got to a new page. And if you look really closely, you can see like the flicker of my address bar. And if you look really closely, you'll notice there was an extra parameter put on the end, a little question sign there. But I haven't told it where to go to, so it's trying to like just go to the same page. So unless you give it a target, it's always going to say, I'm just going to keep trying to go to myself. So the target is the next thing. And our target is going to be this. And I'll send it out so everybody can see it. Or there's on GitHub, there's actually a Will Solution branch that you can also look at, which will have this in there. So the target goes in the form. Oops, and that's going to be HTTPS. And that tells the form when I submit, this is where I want to go to. Now, if you travel straight to that target, it's just going to show you a page that's not going to mean much. And in fact, looks like it might not show a page at all. There it goes. It's going to show a page that doesn't mean much. It's going to have the curly bracket, students, and then nothing else. But that's our web server. That's like the location of our web server. And that exists on the internet, and so we're going to send data to that. Yeah, question? I'm sorry, can you speak up just a little bit? Yes. What do you use action for?
It's the same thing.
Same thing? Let's use action then. In fact, I might have just misspoke, but let's use action instead. Looks like that works. And then if for some reason action doesn't work, we'll go back to target. And then method. So what is method used for? Because I agree that's something that we haven't put in here yet. Yeah.
Like getting or post, like, so getting information or posting information, so like here you'll be posting information to that source.
Yeah. So you can put any of these in. It's saying which of these request types am I going to send you. And so you always have a get or a post, and then there's another way to add, put, and delete to it. But for the most part, you always put in either get and post. You want to get information with this form, or are you trying to create a piece of information? In this case, we want to create a piece of information. So we're going to say method post. And don't everybody start submitting their form at the same time, because it's not finished yet. But what this form means, what this code means on the screen, is, hey, I'm going to create a form. I want it to go to this address. And I want to say it's a post method. So that when it travels to this address, I want it to contain everything in the form, and I want it to say, hey, I'm a post method. I'm a post method, and I carry with me all this data. Go ahead and, I know a few people have already done number 5, I bet, but go ahead and add 5, which is add 2 more inputs. Add 1 for favorite animal, and then add 1 for favorite food. Because those are a little different than first name, last name, and just to show a new field set, I'm going to say let's have a new field set. And these 2 are going to be favorite animal I did that wrong, didn't I? That's input, not label. But every input can have a label. Now there's one thing I'm noticing that we're actually missing from our inputs. Does anybody else notice it? So somebody yelled out type. What could type do for us?
Determine whether it's going to be a string or a number or something else useful like that.
Yeah, so and then the answer was, if you add the type email or type phone number or type int, then the browser can help you and it can say, hey, that's not an email, and it'll stop the form. It'll make sure that what you enter is a real thing. But these are all strings, so we're okay not having type for now. But what else are we missing? Yeah. What does that mean? What do you mean by a value? So
What it is, I mean, what the selection or the detail is.
yeah, so all of these inputs now are going to be on the screen. First name, last name, favorite animal, favorite food. But when we send them to this other server, we have to say, hey, this input corresponds to this data type. So we can use value and we can use name to do that. So here's what value does. Value is what's actually in the blank. So if I wanted to pre-fill first name with something, I could come in here into the input and I could say, hey, you know what, the value for everybody's form that ever comes to this website should be Will. I could start you off with Will. It's just like a checkbox. That's also a type of input. And you know how sometimes on websites, the pre-checked one is please email me about all these exclusive offers. They said, you know what, when they come to this page, fill that checkbox. That deserves to be checked. And then the terms and condition one is unchecked. So then you have to check one and uncheck the other. So that's value. That's going to set a pre-value to it. Or in JavaScript, what we're going to find out next time, if you wanted to, while somebody's typing, to get the value from the form, you would use that value attribute. So that's how value can be useful. And there's one other thing called name. And name is what is going to accompany the data to the server. So whatever we type in this input, it's going to go to the server with this first name label. So it's almost like it's going to travel as a JavaScript object. Not quite. It's going to be something called JSON, which is the subject of next class. But it's going to travel with this label. So we're going to make name. We're going to give all of these a name. I hope it's name. I kind of forgot. Yeah.
Is there a benefit to writing it? Like in the reading, there's two different ways to write these. One is the for, and then you put ID afterwards. The other one is putting it like within the label tags themselves.
Yeah, I like using the for. The question was, is there a difference with the label to put the input inside the label or to do the for? And I guess I was just taught for. I'm not sure if there's like a big difference. I'd have to Google it. But most people I know do for, but if the other one works, then it works, and go for it. Okay, so I'm just going to refresh my page. It shouldn't have changed at all, because all I did was add names to everything. Okay, it didn't change at all. So I go back to my original page. It's got all this stuff I still haven't submitted yet. Quite a few people have submitted. Someone whose favorite animal is the honey badger. And Sean looks like he's already submitted his. But you don't get candy if you submitted before time was ready. So what's going to happen is with all these names, that data is going to accompany it to this website. And then in a different server somewhere, I have running on this website, I have say, hey, take someone's submitted data that they entered, just like an account, like a real website would do, and save it to this database. And so every time you're going to post this form, and you can post it whenever you want now, every time you're going to enter your information, and you submit that form, it's going to send it to a new server. That server is going to save it to a database. And then that server is going to give you back a response. And that response is going to say, you were good, you were bad, you failed, something. In this case, the server is going to redirect you, I think, to everybody's page. So you can just see everybody's information. The actual request would happen here in this network tab. Oops, looks like it didn't give me anything back. But here's the actual request that it sent out. It said, hey, I'm going to send a post request, and I'm going to send it to this URL, and it got back a 200, which in our case means okay. It means good. This is the actual address of this request URL. And then it goes through this, and it says, here's the form data. This is what you actually sent. You sent first name Santa, last name Claus, favorite animal reindeer. And all these labels, all these keys came from the name in that form that we set. So I'll refresh, and hopefully I'll see Santa. I'll see a bunch of other people too. Yeah, there I am in the middle, Santa. So if anybody is willing to demonstrate or to volunteer, is anybody submitting and getting nothing to show up and is willing to let me use their computer up here?
If by nothing shows up, do you mean an empty pair of brackets?
An empty string.
Mine just brought to the website, but it doesn't show that.
Okay, then travel to this website.
Is it the Rocky Fortress thing?
It's the same,
There we go.
it's the exact same target that's in Slack. If you open that up, it'll open up to everybody.
I'm seeing stuff now.
Some of them are showing up, but not all of them are showing up. So for example, I'm going to pick on Rebecca right here. first name is showing up and last name is showing up, but not favorite food and favorite animal, I would go back into your code and say, okay, I have my name for first name, and I have my name for last name. Do I also have a name for favorite animal and favorite food? I would check those two things. Because the label doesn't matter. What matters is what you add here. If I change this to first name, and I change first name to favorite food, I can go back to my web page, and I can say the same thing, Santa Claus, reindeer, cookies, and submit it. And it's going to say first name cookies. And the form data says, hey, you told me favorite food was Santa. Because it doesn't matter what you see it, what matters what you write within that input, within that HTML. We have one last thing to cover. Yeah. Not the empty brackets. I guess my question is yours on the screen? Did someone say their favorite animal was? I resemble that remark. I resent that remark. So I actually, if yours isn't showing up, you actually have to hit enter on that page. It's giving you back empty brackets, but you have to actually hit the enter key to see what's actually there. Okay, I got one more thing to show you. So what we saw, here's that REST word again, REST and API both. What we saw was a 200 error. And I'm going to go through kind of some of the more popular codes that you get back, right? So a big one that you'll get back is 200, which means everything was good, it worked out, congratulations. So 200 is used to say successful. A redirect means that you went to this page, I think you want to go to this other page, so I'm just going to send you along. I'm going to, you traveled to willswebsite.com, but I'm under construction, so I'm just going to forward you to launchcode.com. And then you get to the bad errors. So 400 and 500 means that something is not right. So 404, right, that's a common page that people see. 404 means, hey, what you're looking for, the resource is not found, it's missing. 403 means the resource may or may not be here, but you are not allowed to see it. You are forbidden. Yeah.
What is 418 I'm a teapot?
Yeah. It's a web code, and some websites will respond with 418, I'm a teapot. So that means if you have a web server, you can, any request, you can send someone back that they're a teapot. The web is kind of a weird place. And a lot of these, like that came up, it looks like as a joke. If I remember, it's some type of joke, and it just, April Fool's joke, and it just kept along, and I guess they're just not going to get rid of it. But yeah, that's a good catch. And then 500 means something went really wrong. So 400 usually means like there's some type of user mistake, right? You are not authentic. You didn't give your username and password. You're not supposed to access this resource. This resource is not where you're looking for it. So 400 is like the client made an error. The web browser made an error in the request. 500 is like I made an error. The server made an error. Internal server error is kind of like your general like, hey, I broke and I don't want to tell you why I broke. 503, or even I don't know why I broke, right? So service unavailable is I'm just not up right now. This website is not functioning. I'm not up. 503, not available. And then there's a whole bunch of other ones here. And these 500s are like, these are the servers. These are my fault. 400, client's fault. 300, I'm moving you somewhere else. 200, everything is good. And then 100 are informational. Yes?
So when I didn't have the little boxes, entry boxes,
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't do my input ID.
So the question was, you didn't have inputs here?
Yep. And I thought I threw the name on the label for, but it does not.
Yeah, the label, so that's a good question. So when you're building a form, the label is just to help the user know where to put information. It's not doing anything to send information to the server. The only thing that's sending information to the server is two things really, right? It's this action and method combination. This is saying I want to send it to this place and I want it to be a post, or what's actually where the information comes from. So if I don't have the inputs on there, then it's not going to have any information to send. Alternatively, while labels are nice, you can leave them off, right?
Yeah.
Like they're very helpful to people to read what's going on, but the form will work. It'll send and it'll create even without that label on it.